Well, we're on air with Fiona Williams. How are you, Fiona?
I'm good, Hillary, enjoying the rain.
Yes, so am I. It's delightful, actually. It's been quite dry this spring, and I guess yes, my pot plants are struggling. I'm not so good at watering, so And last year I didn't have to water them at all. That was beautiful weather with the rain.
Well, I think that's the thing. The last few years we've been spoilt in a way because the summers haven't been as bad as they're forecasting this year, so we could get away with a lot. But I think this year's going to be a bit different.
Yes.
So what I thought I'd talk about this morning is how the pot plants might survive over summer a little bit better. So I've actually been spending the last couple of days lugging pots all over the garden. So I'm a bit sore and sorry for myself, but I'm hoping the pots will survive a little bit better.
Right, I see. So there's a trick to their position, how to keep them going by changing their position.
Well, there's a whole series of tricks, as always with gardening. We've got a range of possibilities that we can do to try and make things a little more successful. Nothing's guaranteed to work, but if you try a couple of options, you've got more chance of getting through. I think with pots, the biggest issue is obviously protecting them from the heat of the sun. So obviously shade is a big issue, but we don't always have a lot of shade. Certainly in my garden, I've got a very small number of patches of shade, but I've got a lot of sun, and that means I need to get the pots out of that area and give them a bit more protection. Now, in previous years, this was reasonably easy because I'd moved them all under the protection of the veranda. But this year, given the fire predictions, and particularly up in our area, where I'm trying to move all the pots away from the house so that we don't, if we do have a bushfire, that we won't have a situation where we'll get embers and things behind the pots and between the house and the pots. So I've been having to make some big changes to try and clear out my veranda from any pots that would normally be sitting there. And my answer this year has been shade cloth. I've put up a couple of ropes between trees and attached shade cloth to it so that I've actually manufactured an area of quite intense shade. I've used the 70% protection so that the pots will have a good sense of shade protection and hopefully stay cooler. And so I've been slowly moving everything out into that area to give myself a bit more chance of them surviving.
Right, I see. So shade is the trick, and if you're in an area where there's bushfires, perhaps shade cloth. I guess that would be the case for some of the more your vegetables as well. For some of the more delicate, like lettuce and things like that.
Well, it's a good option. You can't always do it. So I think the thing is you need just a series of options that you can put in place. And the other thing I've been doing is, so I've got some really pretty begonias, but they're all in black plastic pots. And the thing about black plastic is that heats up dramatically in the sun. And so you'll end up with a beautiful plant and some totally cooked roots underneath the soil. So in that case, I've got a few bigger terracotta pots, and I've been either putting a single big begonia in the terracotta pots, or sometimes I've been grouping them. So I'll just put 3 of the potted begonias in the one big terracotta pot, and that means that the sun doesn't hit the black plastic. And it also means that I can use some mulch. I've just got some coarse bush mulch, and I put that in on between the pots and over the surface. So I'm still mulching the plants and giving them some extra protection. So hopefully that'll get some of the begonias through the heat of the summer as well.
Right. So could you bury your pot plants in the soil or partially put them in the soil to keep them a bit cooler?
You can. That's certainly an option. I must admit, digging holes in my garden, I've either got rock about 2 millimetres below the surface,
I see.
or else I've got some very solid-looking tree roots that are managing to go through most of my ground, so I avoid digging holes as far as possible.
Right, yeah, okay. And I guess that's the case for a lot of people. You've got
I think
hard
so.
clay and things, especially this. Well, if it's not raining, the ground will be as hard as a rock, whatever it is.
Maybe today's the day to go and dig a hole if you need to, because
Definitely.
it's a bit softer out there at the moment. The other one that I just wanted to talk about, there's a couple of other ideas. One is your good old white polystyrene boxes that you can get from greengrocers and places like that. And if I've got pots of cuttings or seedlings or little plants, I tend to pack them all in the white polystyrene tubs because that just works fantastically. I use the ones that have got the holes in the bottom so I can just keep watering them. I mean, it might be more sensible not to take the cuttings in the heat of the summer, but I'm not very good at stopping my propagating habits, so I tend to end up with lots more. But you can get a good selection of little pots in those polystyrene boxes, and having the polystyrene itself provides a bit of insulation, and then the white obviously means it all reduces the heat. So that's a really good way of helping little pots survive over summer. Mightn't be beautiful, but it works.
Yeah, okay. So propagating things, how you're putting these little plants into the ground, how long does it take for the roots to start happening or forming at the base of the cutting?
That's the lovely thing about summer. We might complain about the heat, but for a lot of plants, the heat means that the roots can be starting to develop within a week. If you're trying to propagate in winter, people often use heated mats to propagate on to encourage the growth of the roots. But at this time of the year, we at Hurstbridge Sow and Grow Garden Group, we held a geranium and pelargonium swap night the other night, or the other week. And at this time of the year, if you stick a geranium cutting in a little pot of soil and give it a drink, it will be starting to root within a week and looking like quite a good plant within 3 weeks. It's astonishingly quick.
So in other words, even though it's dry, not much rain, it's a really great time to propagate because of
It is a great time to propagate. You do need to keep the water up if plants are propagating. Well, for most plants, some of the succulents, they need a period of dryness, but most plants, give them a drop of water and the roots will come on and you'll be ending up with 10 extra plants from the one set of cuttings. Then you just have to decide what to do with them.
Right. Well, we'll have a little break and be back shortly.
88.6 Plenty Valley FM.
Garwood Kalinga Australia aims to both support the community development work in the Philippines as well as develop the template to help marginalised communities throughout regions in Australia. Garwood Kalinga Australia is a not-for-profit charitable foundation registered with the Australian Charities Not-for-Profits Commission, working for poverty alleviation, emergency response, social enterprise training and start-ups within communities in Victoria. GKA is a bicultural worker for CALD COVID emergency response. For more information, you can call 0452 481 187 or send us an email at garwoodkalingaoz@gmail.com.
Deep Cuts, a motley collection of memories and musical oddities featuring lesser-known music by the artists you know and some you don't. Album tracks, forgotten single mixes, B-sides and one-hit wonders will all be part of the fair. Wednesdays from 6 p.m. on 88.6 Plenty Valley FM.
Well, we're back on air with Fiona Williams, and she's been talking about how to keep your pot plants going over the really hot summer months, which we're going to have pretty shortly.
We are indeed. I can see it coming. There were a couple of other things I wanted to suggest to people that I've found quite useful. As I said earlier, I haven't got a lot of shade, but one of the tricks is how you can use the patches of natural shade that you've got in the garden to put as many things in as possible. So I've got one spot down the hill where I get a bit of drainage coming down from the driveway. And I've just gone and bought a length of chain from one of the big hardware stores, and I've slung it between a number of trees. And that's made a fantastic spot for hanging baskets. I can just hook them onto the chain links and actually fit a lot of hanging baskets into this small patch of shade. And I find that's quite a good strategy because it gets them off the ground, and in that part of the garden we can get a few hungry wallabies and things that'll come and eat things. So the plants are up off the ground, but in deep shade and all packed in next to each other. So I'll move them later in the season to get a bit more sunlight, but just to get you through the intense hot summer, it's something else to think about.
And if you've got a lawn and you want to keep mowing it, I guess you can keep mowing it underneath those pot plants.
Yes.
And that's one frustrating thing about pot plants. If you put them in the middle of the garden, you have to mow around them, and then they get tall grass and whippersnip, and they're much more fussy like that.
They are more fussy, but of course, don't forget that longer grass around the pots actually insulates them a bit more from the heat as well. So there are advantages in letting the grass grow around your pot if you're trying to keep it a bit cooler.
Okay. All right. A question I'd like to ask is, if you go away for a week or two during the holidays, and people do that in the summer, how do you keep those pot plants watered? Is there a trick to it?
Well, my solution has been a timer on a tap and a sprinkler.
Right.
It's one of the things I've struggled with over years, and it's one of the other advantages of pulling the pots together into one area and not having them scattered along the length of the veranda. Because I actually, when I was positioning them, I started by putting a sprinkler up on an upturned terracotta pot. I turned it on, and so I could see quite clearly how far it would reach. And I knew that anything within that wet area would be able to be watered by an automatic timer on the tap, one of those things that you just set for a certain amount of time every day. And I've got a number of those, and I use those religiously. So that works for those sorts of pots. The other solution is obviously the self-watering pot. So anything that's got a bit of a reservoir of water at the bottom, so self-watering pots is good. And for vegetables, I've just moved into wicking garden beds, which was a bit of an effort to build in the first place, but it has revolutionised my veggie gardening. And I can go for about 5 or 6 weeks between watering, which is extraordinary in this climate.
Really? That's amazing.
Mm.
Yes, definitely in our climate, you practically have to water your vegetables every night.
Yes. Well, if you want to go for a wicking garden bed, so you've got a reservoir of water all the time and the water just wicks up, that means you don't have to water every day, and that makes a big difference. I think it also helps the growth of the plants because they haven't got the feast or famine approach. They've just always got a reliable source of water around their roots.
So how does this process work?
Well, it's basically you need to build a waterproof box, and we did it by building it with sleepers, and then you use a waterproof lining.
Yes.
Put some stone, some gravel or some scoria down the bottom to the depths of about 30 centimetres. And then you fill that with water, put some geotextile fabric on the top of it, and then you build your garden bed on top of that. And what happens is the water that's down the bottom, once you've wet the soil, the water continues to wick up through the soil profile, and you've always got water available to it. It's a really people. If you look up wicking garden beds online, and you'll get a bit more information. But it's the easiest way to grow vegetables in a hot summer.
Okay, and you don't end up getting stagnant water or anything like that. It's quite Okay.
No,
Right.
it's brilliant. What we've got is we've got a pipe at one end of the system that can be used to fill the garden bed, and then we've actually got a drain hole at the other, and that's normally plugged. If we wanted to, we can empty it, but we never do because there's no insects or anything get into it because it's a sealed system, and the water is just constantly available.
Sounds really, really
Very
great.
well.
Sounds like I think we should do that with our vegetables.
Oh, look, I tried so long and so hard to grow vegetables in the soil, and I kept lavishing care and attention on the soil, and every tree root for miles around immediately leapt in there and took all the soil and all the nutrients and all the water, and it was just a road to nowhere, and I'll get about 8 tomatoes. But now you just get masses of them, and I've grown basil in industrial quantities. I've never had it like that before.
Well, I've never had really much success with vegetables, and maybe that's our problem. That's what's occurring with us. So I'll try this.
Garden beds, it's a topic in itself.
Right, okay. Excuse me. Now, just one more thing, and that's sea soiling and fertilising your pot plants. What's the best trick with that?
In winter, I go sea sol all the time. So anything that really grows and protects the root system, the sort of I tend to not to use the inorganic type chemical fertilisers. I'll use seaweed-based ones or anything that provides a tonic for the soil, and you just keep it going. Not too much nitrogen. You don't want enormous amounts of leafy green growth. You want a good solid root with an excellent root system. So something like sea sol is marvellous.
And what about your root-bound pots? Is there a trick to actually... I've got a couple of root-bound pots and they're quite large, so there's nowhere to go. There's nothing bigger to go into. Is there a trick to fixing that problem up? Or?
I was having a few of those ones yesterday, and I know exactly what you mean. If something gets really solid and it'll get hydrophobic, so any water you put on the thing just rolls off the top and you feel you'll never get there. So
Yes.
my issue is I've got a couple of big tubs and I'll soak the plant overnight. I'll put a mixture of sea sol and also a wetting agent so that you'll really manage to break down that hydrophobic impact around the moisture, around the components of the soil, and over time it'll come in. And then you just need to move. If it's absolutely root-bound as well as dry and hydrophobic, you do need to find a pot that's a bit bigger and put it in. The other option, depending on the plant, is I've had a lot of success with just being rootless and chopping roots off.
Yes.
I mean, bonsai is a long and honourable thing, and many roots can cope with being, if you chop the roots back, and the plant will survive. It's a radical idea, but sometimes there's nothing else to do if you've got a great plant and the pot that you want to keep. Well, then you can just prune the roots.
Yes, I saw on a television program once a gardener actually getting a very long drill bit and drilling into his pot plants to get the water into it when they were root bound.
That's an interesting idea, but yes, I think you have to remember who's boss.
Yes.
Boss. The plant will, in most cases, survive what you do to it.
Okay, well, look, our time is running out. So I'd like to thank you, Fiona, for this quarter hour. It's been wonderful. It's been wonderful throughout the year having you drop in and do shows for us, as well as the other volunteers from your Sow and Grow group. And I'm hoping we'll hear from all of you next year as well.
I'm sure you will.
Okay, thank you very much and have a Merry Christmas.
Thank you. You have the same. Bye.
Bye.